Let's kick it off. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for making it here on a Thursday evening. The topic tonight is home energy efficiency grants. My name is Colm Garvey from the Clare Community Energy Agency, and we've got a couple of interesting people with us here tonight who are going to give us some good information about that, I think. So if we can go on just to show the agenda. First of all, I'm just going to speak about some of a broad kind of gloss over what the different energy efficiency measures are in the home. And then we're going to move on. Marcella Maher-Keogh from Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative is going to talk to us. Now, they are an organisation, a voluntary organisation in Tipperary who manages deep retrofits, doing kind of high quality energy upgrades of houses. So she's going to be speaking to us about the current funding opportunities that they have available there. Then we're going to have Tom Golden from Cratloe, because the Cratloe Community is engaging with ECTC, that's Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative. So they're already engaging with them, so we'll get a little bit of feedback from Tom as to how that's going. And then we're going to have McKenna from talking about sustainable energy communities, which is a process or a program from the SAI, which provides support for community groups and manages funding for energy upgrades as well. And then I'll have a quick word about government policy, just to put that into context of what's going on over the next few years, because a lot of the energy upgrades is being pushed by government policy. Okay, so let me just check the time. Okay, so energy efficiency in the home. We'll kick off on that. First thing, I think this is an interesting thing to show in the beginning, because these figures that are being shown here come from a UK voluntary cooperative who does energy retrofits in houses, and they asked all the people who did the retrofits in their houses what was the reason for doing that. Now, people gave multiple answers. This is why we're seeing lots of different things here. But I think what's interesting, some people come to it with the attitude of saying, well, if you want to do an energy upgrade, it's because you want to save money, or if you want to do it, well, it's because you want to save the planet. But you can see it's actually a lot more complicated and a lot kind of multi-leveled than that. Particularly, I think what's interesting here is if you look at the yellow figures, as to what the yellow charts here, people talk a lot more about kind of well-being and about health and about just having a comfortable house to live in. That's one of the main advantages that comes from improving the energy efficiency of your home. Energy efficiency in your home means you're losing less energy through bad insulation or through drafts. The energy that is being supplied to your home is being supplied in a more efficient manner. So your home is a healthier and a warmer place. And of course, that goes along with as well the concern for reducing carbon emissions, for reducing energy bills, which is obviously part of it as well. And also, I suppose, making the home climate resilient, which means just kind of future-proofing against whatever may change. And the idea that your house may be passed on to future generations. So having something better to pass on to the future generations. So I think it's interesting to know it's not just a question of, what's the payback? It's also what is the quality of what I get from improving the energy efficiency of my home. And one of the major comebacks from that is that you have a better quality of life. It's healthier, your house is warmer, it's more comfortable. Everybody knows the difference between a cold and drafty home and a warm and comfortable home. Okay, so just briefly, if we look at the terms of energy efficiency, one of the questions we have to look at first of all is how is energy being lost in a home which is not energy efficient? Where is the energy going? Now energy obviously goes someplace because it doesn't stay in the house. There's always some level of heat loss. The idea is to reduce that amount of heat loss as much as possible. So in terms of how you would target the different areas that you can target for upgrades, you can see here just from this figure, it's showing that this is kind of rough average figures, that 25% of the heat loss is done through the roof. Now, the good news about that, even though that's a large amount of heat loss, is that's the easiest one to tackle in terms of attic insulation. That's the handiest one to act on, and we'll be looking at some of the grants that are available for that. The next big one after that is walls, energy being lost through your walls. Like if you have let's say if you have an older house, a stone wall house or a cavity block house that doesn't have wall insulation, a lot of energy being lost out there, but there are a number of different, some simple, some more complex ways you can work with that, and different grants associated with that as well. So they're the two big ones: losing it through the roof, losing it through the walls. The next two, well, I suppose the next three are kind of at the same level. One is through if your windows and doors aren't of good quality, maybe you don't have double glazing, or the double glazing has been getting some leaks. That's about 10. These are rough figures again. And then the next one though, the 15% on leaks is interesting because the leaks is about drafts. You know, it's about little gaps in your windows, gaps in your doors, gaps on pipes coming in and out of the house, which is an area which is quite easy to fix. Like in terms of the low hanging fruit, this is the one that even as a lot of people are capable of putting in a little bit of draft stripping around the windows or doors, or blocking holes that they can see, or even if you have an open chimney, getting one of those inflatable things that would block a chimney to avoid air being lost in a very simple kind of manner. And then heat loss to the ground, okay, which is obviously a bit more complicated if you want to improve on heat loss to the ground. But you can see the big ones there are roof, reducing the heat loss through the roof, reducing the heat loss through the walls, and then it's the drafts, it's the losing of air through leaks, and windows and doors. Now, windows and doors probably, I suppose, are the biggest ticket in terms of the cost of upgrading, but we'll see that the other ones are more accessible, and that's why they're covered by the grants. Okay, so there are a whole pile of grants that are available from SAI. Now, in this presentation, which I'll be sending out to you, if you click on this link here, that'll bring you to the SAI page, which explains the level of grants. We'll go through a couple of them in a while, but basically you can get grants for improving the insulation of your house. That's your walls, and your attic, for heat pumps. Now, heat pumps are, it's what the government is pushing in terms of if you want to replace an oil boiler or a gas boiler. A heat pump is an electric heating system, but it's a very high efficiency electric heating system where for every unit of electricity you use, you get a multiple of units of heat being generated in your house. So that's what's being pushed, and I think Marcella will probably talk about that in a moment as well. The next one, heating controls. This is obviously very important in terms of having a thermostat that works correctly, or being able to control the temperature in different rooms. So you only switch on the heat when you need the heat, and then you switch it off when you don't need it. So that's improving it's reducing the amount of energy that you use. And there are also grants then available for solar thermal and also solar electricity. In terms of conditions, the work has to be done, if you want to avail of the grants, it has to be done by the SCI registered contractors. And again, that's a link. Sorry, let me go back there. That's a link to the SCI page that will list out, if you want to search for somebody in County Clare who will do the insulation of your house, it'll give you the list of all the approved contractors. So that's how you'll find the people to do the work for you. Now, in terms of some of the conditions, the grants, particularly, well, specifically for insulation and for heating controls and solar thermal, only apply to older houses that are older than 2006, because it's considered if your house is more recent, then the building regulations have advanced to such a stage that you already should have a reasonable level of insulation in your house. Now, there's an exception for that, I mentioned there, for heat pumps, because they've put it as 2011 as being the cutoff date for that. And that's the date that the electricity meter got installed in your house. So if your electricity meter was installed before the 1st of January 2011, you can still qualify for a grant for a heat pump. Now, 2011 is also the cutoff for the solar electricity. I forgot to mention that, okay? Now, okay, in terms of the grants, this is just to give you an idea of the level of grants that are available for the different upgrades. So in terms of insulation, you can see typically the SEI, they try to target that the grant will cover about 35 to 40% of the cost. So if you're seeing the attic insulation is going to cost about 400 euros, sorry, you have a grant of 400 euros, then that means that it's actually going to cost you in the region of about 1,100, and you'll get 400 euros back. And then likewise for internal insulation, basically the two types of wall insulation are internal insulation or external insulation. And you can see from the difference of the grant values there, the external insulation is more expensive because it's a bigger job. It's a more complex and bigger job to do, and that's why the grant value that's available is higher there. And you can see, depending on, I suppose, okay, a lot of people in County Clare, I think we're talking more about detached houses or semi-detached houses, maybe less apartments. So you can see the level of grants that's available there. Now, in terms of heating controls, you can see, again, in terms of the low-hanging fruit, if you want to improve your energy efficiency, improving your heating controls is a very good way of doing it, getting a good thermostat, controlling zones and making sure that you're not using energy when it's not needed. And there's a decent grant, a 700 euro grant for that. And then next one down then is heat pumps. As I said, heat pumps they run on electricity, but they're highly efficient. And for every unit of electricity that you use, they'll generate multiple 3 to 4 units of heat into your house. So it ends up being substantially cheaper to run than running an oil boiler. And you can see the grants, typically we're talking €3,500 for the different heat pump systems. Now, the most common one, I suppose, that's in terms of the work that's required is the air to water heat pump. That's, sorry, the easiest one from an installation point of view. That means it's taking energy from the air outside, converting it into water, which is then circulated in the central heating of the house inside. So again, you can see the grant about €3,500, and that's about 35% of what the cost of a heat pump will be. And that depends obviously on the size of your house. Larger houses will need larger heat pumps. The ground source heat pump or the water to water or exhaust air heat pump, they're a little more complex from the installation point of view. They cost a bit more, but the grant value stays the same because the focus from the government is really kind of on value for money. So the focus is on the air to water heat pump there. Okay, now one thing that is going to be coming up the whole time whenever you're engaging with SEI for getting grants is getting BER certificates. Now people are getting more and more familiar with the idea of a certificate, which is the building energy rating, which shows the performance of your house. Whether you're if you're an A1, that means you don't use a lot of energy. If you're an F, that means you use a lot of energy. It's a requirement for a lot of the grants. You need to get a BER done on your house. If you need to get a BER done, you can find the list of assessors on the SEI website, and there's also a map that I've included in this, which will show you and give you the details of the different BER assessors in County Clare. So that map is that's just a static map. The link that I give you there actually brings you, if you click on each one of those dots, it'll bring you up the name and the telephone number and the email address of the person that's doing the BER assessments. Okay. Okay. Now I've got some polls I want to do. I think we'll leave them till the end because we're moving a little bit behind time. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is get Marcella to come in now from Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative, and she's going to speak about the work that they've been doing for the last number of years. They're probably one of the most experienced structures in Ireland for doing retrofits for communities. So Marcella, if you want to take over there, and I'll stop sharing and you can share your screen.
Thank you, Colin. Just get this up. Hopefully everybody's seeing my slides. Yeah. So Good evening, everybody. I'm the project coordinator for Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative. I suppose we started back in 2012 from a conversation that was started in the church energy team, or in a hall. They were trying to keep the GEA team in their community, and they were looking around to see what type of what they could do to kind of generate employment and keep the guys in their community. So they came up with a couple of different ideas around what they could do, but energy efficiency was one of them. So they set up an energy within Drumban Upper Church, and it was actually the first sustainable energy community within Ireland. And it coincided as well in 2012 with a pilot launch that SEI were trialing, I suppose, and we were just in the right place at the right time. So it was about bringing a group of people together and getting the best, getting retrofits done or energy upgrades done on their homes, and getting a buy-in from a contractor. So, you know, community purchasing, I suppose, so that there was like 10 people getting attics done and they were getting better value for money. So it kind of grew legs from there. We had other communities looking in at what Drumban were doing, the likes of Kilcommon, Laura and Bird Hill. Then they wanted to join in 2014. And then Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative was set up then on a legal standing, I suppose, in 2015. So every year then we would apply to SEI, Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, for funding for these community projects. And as I said, we've been doing them since 2012. And then this year now they have a national housing retrofit scheme as well that SEI have launched. So we have funding available for that. So Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative is a one-stop shop. So we have energy auditors, we've got contractors, we've got project coordinators as well, and we manage the whole retrofit for homeowners. And I suppose we're all working towards the climate action plan, which have targets of 500,000 homes over the next 10 years. So I suppose, sorry, now this, all right. Yeah, so since 2012, ECTC, excuse me, ECTC have retrofitted over 840 homes, 25 commercial and community projects with an investment of about 10.2 million within our communities. So it's been a fantastic project, I suppose, over the last 9 years for all the communities, and there's 13 communities now on board with ECTC. So as I say, we have a community group. So instead of doing individual grants, we do it as a community and a group. So the community program then, who can benefit? So everybody can benefit. There's grants that are available for community buildings up to 50%, for commercial buildings for businesses up to 30%. Then for all homeowners, so everybody's entitled to a grant. So up to 35% for everybody, that's not means tested, and then up to 80% for people in receipt of subsidies like fuel allowance, family income support, or carers allowance. Then under the, sorry, I keep going backwards tonight, under the National Housing Retrofit Scheme, then that's a up to 35% grant that's available. And I suppose with the community group projects, we are bound by SEI rules, so it's more of a deep retrofit that we look after. So it's making your house heat pump ready. It's about getting your house up to a B2 energy rating, having an uplift of 100 kilowatts. So on that BER scale, we have to bring it from a minimum of a C2 rating. So if your house is C1, you wouldn't actually be eligible, or even higher than C1, you wouldn't be eligible under the community grant scheme to get funding. And it's about including heat pumps into your home and fabric first. So making sure that your house is heat pump ready as well. So getting a technical assessment done, and I'll mention that in a second. So as part of the community group as well, we have partnered with, I suppose part of it is getting finance together as part of this one-stop shop and making it easier for people to access all areas. So we've partnered with 11 credit unions throughout Tipperary and bordering on Limerick as well, because we've got communities obviously we've Capamore, we've got Cratloe, and now we've got Cratloe as well. So we're pushing out over the border of Tipperary. And we've got good rates with the affinity credit unions for 3.95. So that starts to make sense when people have to borrow for their retrofits. So what the programme covers, I suppose, and that's what's different to the individual grants, I suppose, would be the floor insulation would be different, the windows and doors. So windows and doors are covered under the group scheme, but it's when you're doing a deep retrofit, so you're doing a couple of elements together. The air-to-water heat pump or air-to-air heat pumps, wood-burning stoves are covered, and then ventilation systems are covered as well. So it's very important when you insulate your house, you must ventilate. So you're making your house, you're getting rid of all those leaks, you're making the house airtight, you're making it super insulated, and then you want to make sure that you are ventilating, so you're reducing any chance of condensation within your house. So these ventilation systems, the demand control ventilation system is an easier system to install for a retrofit. But I suppose if you were really gutting your house out, or even if you're putting a new build, a mechanical heat recovery system is a very good one as well to use. Also then covered is solar PV, so that's photovoltaics that generate electricity from the sun, and LED lighting also. Colm touched on this, so we would always look at the fabric first of the building, so making sure that you're keeping the house warm, and then installing your heat pump once the fabric of the house is right. So we have to carry out a technical assessment so it's like a BER assessment, but it's working on the heat loss indicator of the house. So the assessor goes out, he would do the survey, but he would come back with a report to say, right, you need to do X, Y, and Z to bring your house up to be heat pump ready. So SEI won't give you a grant, and which is good, I suppose, if your house has an F rating, because what you don't want to do is install a heat pump into a house that is leaky, and that is going to cost you a lot of money to run. So I just have a quick case study here. This is a BER rating, and the case study was F. So we retrofitted the house, and this homeowner was getting a 35% grant. The floor area was 120 meters squared. So we installed attic insulation, we did the external wall insulation, air tightness, installed the heat pump, windows and doors, demand control ventilation system, the energy monitor, and the LEDs. So the cost of this retrofit was 43,500. And then with the grant back, the 35% grant on that, it was only costing the homeowner 28,275. So you're bringing your house up to a B2 rating at that. So that your bills are being reduced then when your house is up to a B2. So for the case study then, the case study was the BER was F, but before they retrofitted the house, they were paying €2,250 on oil every year. Their ESB bill then was 920. So in total, to heat and run electricity on the house, it was 3,170. Then after the retrofit, when it was up to the B2, you were removing your cost for oil because all the oil was gone, no more oil anymore. You're installing your heat pump. Your heat pump then, as Colin mentioned, is generated by, the pump is generated by electricity, but it is a renewable type of heating system. And with the ESB cost and the heat pump being run, it was costing 1,500. So the homeowner was actually saving 1,650 euros a year. So with your investment cost of 28,000 odd, it was 17 years payback. So if you go to your credit union then, and with the, there is low interest finance there available, the equal loans right now, the 3.95, it would cost over 10 years, that 28,000 would cost 66 euros a week. And with your savings of 32 euros a week, the actual retrofit is only costing you 34 euros a week. So when you start to break it down and monitor it like that, it starts to be a viable project for homeowners. So then that's what your BER looks like at B2. So I suppose over the years then, we have done retrofits on community and commercial buildings as well. So that's the Capamore Community Centre and Daycare Centre. We would have done insulation and heating upgrades on those. The Bird Hill on the left-hand corner, Laura Community Centre, and also Sola. They're one of our contractors. They got a retrofit done on their building, and it came up to an A-rated building. They got nominated for the SEI awards for that building as well. So that was a great project to work on. So the community benefit, I suppose, it's not just about the individual, especially when working with Energy Communities Tipperary. It's all about, it's about the community. While the homeowners retrofit, there's also a community benefit. So if if a group of people like Cratloe have come together and they said, right, we're going to bring together our community, and a number of houses, or maybe 10 houses might get retrofitted under ECTC, then there's energy savings back into the community. So there's obviously there's the energy savings for the homeowner, but back into the community as well. So for every retrofit that gets done, and so if an attic gets done or a wall gets done, there's carbon credit, energy savings. And as a collective for ECTC, when we're doing, say, 50 or 100 houses, we would have all these carbon credits, and we would sell these back to a participating energy supplier. So the likes of Energia or Electric Ireland, we would do a deal with them every year. And so that money comes back into ECTC. It helps run the project, but it also, any surplus of that money would go back into each community that has participated on the board of ECTC. And I suppose what I didn't mention, and I should have mentioned at the beginning, was Energy Communities Tipperary is made up of a voluntary board of directors. So it's people from each of all the 13 communities. So there's 1 or 2 members from each of those communities on the board, and the board meets about once every month to to oversee the projects, and I would be the project manager, and we have a financial manager as well and a development coordinator. So so what's involved, I suppose, to apply, we have money available for this year for 2021 Energy Communities Tipperary do. So if there's people out there thinking, yeah, I'd like to get a deep retrofit done on my house, or I'm ready to do this, then you can get, the first step, I suppose, is to get the technical assessment done on your house. That's 575. We then have contractors available. We'll get you a quote from an SEI registered contractor. You would formally sign an agreement then, if you're happy to go ahead with the retrofit, you would formally sign an agreement with ECTC. You would pay upfront to ECTC, and we can do it out into stage payments, but they have to be paid for before we draw down the grant from SEAI. Then there's a post BER and airtightness test done once the works are completed. SEI will inspect a portion of the house as well, just to make sure all the works are done, and we check it as project management as well. And then when the works are completed, the grant comes back to the homeowner then at the end. It's usually around Christmas time as well. So there's limited places available for this year. So if there's people interested, please do let me know, contact me directly, or you can apply online as well. So that's it for me, and I'm happy to take any questions as we're going along. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Marcella. Now, I'll be sending out your presentation as well to everybody who's signed on. Okay, so you'll have the access to the website, and I put up the address to the ECTC website and in the chat there as well, if anybody wants to click straight through on that as well. Okay, now we'll move on to Tom Golden. Tom Golden's from Cratloe, and he's an active member of the community who, as Marcella said, they've engaged with ECTC. So Tom is just going to give us a little bit of feedback from the community perspective. Okay, fire ahead, Tom.
Hello everyone, how you doing? I suppose I'd declare myself up front in that I'm a relatively recent convert to be part of ECTC. We're in the community in Cratloe. We were working on a sustainability plan, and one of the things we wanted to look at is how we use energy and looking at retrofits. And we were delighted to find ECTC with lots of knowledge and experience. But I suppose what took me is the community aspect of it, the voluntary group that is really the commitment is not to generate piles of profit for anybody. The commitment is to be successful in retrofitting homes and to make sure there's quality work done. So it's a great reassurance for us as a community to have them as partners. So we've had webinars, we've had lots of people in Cratloe signing up, and hopefully we'll encourage more to get involved. And that we're so happy to stand over, I suppose, first of all, that it starts with a quality assessment. So like we talked to lots of neighbours who are interested in doing something. I think nearly everybody realises the time has come when we need to take the energy use in our homes serious and do what we can to reduce it. And but where to start? So I think the place to start is with a technical assessment, and so with somebody qualified that can, not just somebody who thinks, God, sure, if you put a bit of insulation in the roof, you'll be fine, you know. So it's a genuine quality technical assessment that can get you up to speed with what you really need, and then to look at options. And I think like in the first of it, Colm talked about individual bit grants for insulation, and I guess ECTC looks in particular, and I guess it's SEAI's push for as many people as possible to do deep retrofits, which is a substantial, and I think most people will get a fright when they realise, yeah, there's a lot of work involved in this, and it can be a substantial cost. And I would be encouraging people not to be afraid of it. Like I think Marcella has very well outlined how you can manage to fund it, and it can be cost effective, but it's a long-term investment in your own quality of life, and to bite the bullet and jump into it, and as I said, don't be afraid of it. And if you're looking at it, going through that route with ECTC gives huge levels of confidence in the quality of work and the value it brings back to the community. So yeah, strong supporter. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Tom. We had a question that came through. Somebody asked a question in the chat rather than in the question and answers. Now, I'm writing in the chat, I can't actually ask a question in the questions and answers myself. Somebody just wants to know, does ECTC work outside of Tipperary? They do, as the proof being that Cratloe are already engaging with ECTC on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have any questions, if I can just ask you to engage in the Q&A.
Yeah, so maybe I'd add to that. As I say, I'm recently joined the board of ECTC, and I'm strongly, I guess we were, as a proud Clareman, trying to catch up with Tipperary has led the way in this for a long time, and I'd love to see Clare catching up and lots of communities taking this on and showing that we're going to take it on. So ECTC would be delighted if every community in Clare joined up and became members, and we could extend it everywhere. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Now, in terms of communities, that kind of leads us on to Monica, who's going to speak to us now about the sustainable energy communities, this is the official program of support for communities from SCAI. So Monica, can I give the mic to you?
Perfect. Thanks very much, Colm. Sorry. Hi. Yeah, my name is Monica McKenna, and I'm just going to give you a quick talk around the Sustainable Energy Community Programme. I support my colleague Gloria Callahan, who is a Sustainable Energy Community Mentor. It's with a consortium of Midwest and Southwest mentors. She works with a panel of mentors in Clare, Tipperary, Limerick, Cork and Kerry, who are run under a regional coordinator who is with Ballyhara Development. I'm just going to look at some of the benefits of community energy and outline how communities can access the supports under the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. We look at how energy transition, what benefits that has had for the community, what supports are available, what work can be done, and what kind of benefits can be done by a community doing an energy plan, and how people can get involved. I suppose, what is a sustainable energy community? It was a partnership that was developed with SCAI to develop a sustainable energy system to benefit the community. And I suppose very much like what Marcella and Tom was talking about, it's achieved through energy efficiency, renewable energies, developing a local energy supply with the technical and financial support from the SAI, who provide the grants and the know-how as required. I suppose the benefits for the local community is around money saving and saving energy, stuff that we've already heard. Local employment, well-being, having more comfortable homes and more comfortable community buildings, and creating some funding as well for community groups. And like the overall outcome of it is to help with our energy transition program going forward. I suppose currently there are over 350 sustainable energy communities throughout the country. If you go to the SCI website, you can find a map and you can find all the current sustainable energy communities there. I suppose what we would do as mentors, or what Gloria would do currently as a mentor, is she would look at the learn, plan, do approach to becoming a sustainable energy community. You can see from this slide the number of network members who have the plan part and who have gone the whole way. So what we would do at the learn stage, you would look at being part of the network, around that gathering information about events and learning from other groups. At the plan stage, you would look at what you would want to do within your community. You might get the SAI funding and look at analysis of doing feasibility to do with maybe some particular buildings that you might want to do, or what type of renewable resources you might like for your community. And you would also at this stage maybe do an energy plan, which is an assessment of what would be most suitable for your community. And it would also help the community on how to move forward. And then the do stage is where, if you had your energy plan done, you would act on your plan, you would move forward with particular projects and do what works, look at what works best and do that within your community and get the funding for it. What mentors do then is they would assist groups who wanted to go forward in applying for funding to carry out the local energy plan. The energy plan for at village level is 10,000, and it's 100% funded by the Sustainable Energy Authority. It's very much like if any group has ever got leader funding, where you get the community would apply for it, and once they got acceptance, they would once they got letter of acceptance, they would spend the money, and then they would get it back once the money had been spent from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. About the plan itself, it would normally include a high level of analysis of the energy use within the community, as well as an energy audit on specific local facilities that the community might want to upgrade. And if at that stage technical support was needed, SAI have people and have a pool of technical assistance that can be brought in to support communities. SAI see it as a partnership approach. They look at local communities having the knowledge and having the contacts with the schools and the GEA clubs and the businesses within the community. The time they say that, like the local community, the voluntary input they put in, and the people as a category, like the members who are involved and who come to meetings and who go to network. And the SAI promote the skills development by having the regional webinars and network meetings, and they develop newsletters and site visits and a national Sustainable Energy Community Day. They provide the funding in the form of specific Sustainable Energy Community grants for the establishment of the energy baseline, as well as other grants then for the retrofitting. And they also have a national technical panel who are available for specific knowledge and expertise when required. This is like networking events. When we used to be able to meet in person, the type of networking event that would happen where sustainable energy communities would come together to have events and discuss and learn from each other as communities. I suppose the Sustainable Energy Communities is going for the last few years, and there is a Sustainable Energy Community Handbook that would be very informative and would have a lot on the process and how communities can be involved in the process. I suppose, you know, it's simple and logistic stuff we've been talking about, that if groups want to become involved, what you can do, like, you know, the first step of changing your behavior, you know, stuff, you know, reducing use, turning off lights, plugging out things, you know, it's cheap measures, easy stuff to do, easy stuff for communities to get involved in and promote within their community. And then you move up to the next level that would, you know, investment, but low levels of investments, which could be stuff like the attic insulation or improving insulation, changing light bulbs and energy efficiency appliances, stuff like that, to go on to look at renewables and stuff around solar power and what is, you know, what can be done within your community going forward. So basically that is a very quick overview of sustainable energy communities and how, if a community comes together and wants to get together and become part of sustainable energy communities, we in Clare Local Development Company are very happy to meet with different groups who are interested, and I'll leave Gloria's contact details are available for anyone who wants them.
Okay, thanks very much, Monica.
Thanks.
Now we've got I suppose I'm just going to show one more slide in terms of the scope that needs to be done, but I'm getting some feedback about people looking for specific tips about the kind of things you can do, you know, the quick kind of wins that you can do, maybe not necessarily worrying about grants, but what you can do in terms of, you know, draft proofing and maybe blocking up your chimney and that kind of stuff. Now, we're not going to go into very specific details about those individual things tonight, because there are lots of little things that can be done that you can do yourself without necessarily getting involved with grants or with you know, longer processes. Now, what the Clare Energy Agency is setting up is a forum. We're going to set up an online forum which will allow people to share kind of best practices and little tips that can help everybody without, you know, in a simple manner. And that's something that I'll be sending out to everybody who's registered for the webinar. So you'll be getting that within a week or so. So the idea is, it's one of the reasons for having the Community Energy Agency, is to provide a forum so that people within the community can talk amongst themselves and to give tips and hints so that everybody can progress together. Okay, now before we just get into the questions, I've just got one more slide that I want to show you, which really is kind of showing what, in terms of what the government policy and the scale of the work that's coming down the line over the next 10 years is. Marcella had mentioned that the government policy is to retrofit 500,000 houses in Ireland by 2030. If you bring that down to the scale of County Clare, the population of Clare is 118,000 houses. Okay, we're 2.5% of the population of Ireland. So of those 500,000 homes that are going to be grant-aided, heavily grant-aided by the state, 12,500 of those should be in Clare. If we do things, if that's just divided out proportionally. So you're talking about an actual spend in terms of the jobs this is going to generate, in terms of the money that's going to be generated within the community in Clare. Over the next 9 years, you're talking about 375 million euros being spent. And that is official government policy, that is financed government policy. So as the figure that I give there that's the equivalent of 1,000 jobs a year being sustained or created just in County Clare over the next 9 years. So there's a huge area of activity to be looked at. So anybody who's listening to us who's actually in the trades themselves, who's maybe a plumber, may work with installation, may work with doors and windows, I'd be very interested to get in touch with you in terms of any upskilling that may be needed that can be organised within the county for that, because you can see this is nailed down government policy. This is going to happen. So we need to make sure that Clare does get its fair share of the work and also the benefits of the energy efficiency upgrades, so that the housing stock basically in Clare improves at the same level, and why not even better compared to other counties or other regions in Ireland. So that's kind of a target that we need to go for, is to ensure that we play our part in terms of improving our energy efficiency, and we also get the benefits of the funding from the government for that, with the job creation that goes along associated with that. Okay, now, okay, in terms of questions, I had one question for you, Marcella. You had talked about the technical assessor, and I think that's possibly something new for people, because people are a little bit more familiar with the idea of the BER assessor. Every house that's sold now has to have a BER certificate, whereas the technical assessor seems to be a little bit more specific. Can you explain in what situation somebody needs to get a technical assessor rather than just a BER?
Yeah, so a technical assessment is only required if you are looking to get a heat pump installed in your house. So it's making sure that your house is heat pump ready. This is the terminology that SEI are using. So as part, it's the same software that we use for a BER assessment, but there's parts in it that you're looking at the heat loss calculation. So there's a part in it that the assessor has to go, right, I need to give a specification to say the attic has to be at a certain level to bring it up to a B2 and bring it below this heat loss calculation of 2. So there's a figure that this heat loss calculation. So we need to make sure that the fabric of the building, the attic, the windows, the doors, the floor included, and the walls, that all those combined as the house itself, just as the fabric, so the heat loss indicator has to be below 2. And that means that your house, if the heat loss indicator is below 2, then it is heat pump ready. So if you just do a BER assessment, the BER will be sent out, but they won't actually spend that extra time on the assessment to explain what the heat loss, or to work out the calculation. So there's a couple of different ways you can do the heat loss calculator. So you could say, well, actually, I don't want to rip up my floors because I'm just not going to do it. It's just not financially viable for me. Is there another way I can do it? So if we say, well, you do have to do all your attics, you might already have your cavity walls pumped, but if you do external insulation on your walls and you do your windows and doors, then you get your house down to a heat loss indicator of below 2, and then your house is heat pump ready. Somebody else might say, well, actually, yeah, okay.
Okay, so the technical assessors only indicates that you need to get a heat pump installed.
Yeah.
Okay, we had a question as well.
Colin, I went on a bit, sorry.
Somebody was, no, because there are so many different people involved, different roles involved in this, that it can be a little bit complicated sometimes. Somebody else had a question in terms of the cost of getting a BER done in your home. Now, typically, because I've been involved with a group that's doing a few there recently, BRs seem to go around about the €350. That can depend on the size of the house. It depends on maybe how busy somebody is as well. So around about that. I'll be sending out this presentation. You'll have the link there that'll give you access to who all of the BR assessors in County Clare are. I think in your slide, Marcella, you'd mentioned that the technical assessor is about €475. Was that the figure you had?
575 actually, yeah. That's
575.
That, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's in this specific case, but of course you're then into a more expensive project with the heat pump, so there's a higher grant available for that as well. Okay. Okay, thanks very much. Now, let me see just in terms of the questions that we have there again.
Can I just come in there? Marcella, do you see a question there from Peter Gorman? He's just asking about your costings, where you had a worked example of costings. Can you see that question?
Yeah, did your weekly cost and loan figure in your worked example include the cost of the heat pump, or was that an additional cost after getting the house heat pump ready? No, it would include the cost of the heat pump.
Yeah,
so,
and actually,
yeah.
I think one thing that you brought across there, which is quite important, Marcella, as well, is that when you go through a deep retrofit, there are certain elements in the community grants that you cannot get if you just go as an individual. As you had mentioned there, you'll get your windows and doors can be covered in part. What were the other things I saw?
Your floors.
Yeah, floors and a wood stove can also be covered. There isn't a grant for a wood stove. And also your ventilation
systems.
Yeah, so there's no question if you go for a kind of a more complete package, it's a better overall package that you'll get. Okay, now let me see.
Sorry, can I get you a question? I didn't understand it, so if you could explain again. You mentioned something about the 2011 date cutoff for availing of certain grants. Yeah, can you explain?
If you want to get grants for doing insulation, which is your attic insulation, your wall insulation, those grants are only available if your house is before 2006. Okay, now if you want to get grants for heat pumps, or if you want to get grants for photovoltaic installation, it's from 2011. There are different cutoff points depending on the particular kind of work you're getting done. Okay, we had a question there from Owen. Is the size of your windows reduced when you get external insulation done? Now, Marcella, can you give that?
The size of your windows aren't reduced, but what we would do if we were getting external insulation, we would always, and you were getting windows at the same time, you would always look to move the position of your window out further in the wall, so that when you look at the house from say the road, you're reducing the depth, because with the external insulation you're adding 100 millimeters onto the or more onto the face of your building, so your window can look smaller if it's set back in. And if you're not reducing, or if you're not changing the windows and you're just doing external insulation, you wouldn't do that. But it doesn't reduce, it wouldn't actually reduce the size of your window. You would just do a thinner strip of insulation into the frame of the window, I guess. Because you do have to insulate around the reveals in a sense, but it would be around 25 mil of insulation. So I suppose slightly, if you're not changing your windows, then it would slightly, I guess.
Okay, thanks. Now, there was a question then from Kevin Ryan. Do ECTC deal with individual houses or just community groups? Now, I think as you mentioned there, Marcella, that right now, you have funding available for individual houses can apply on the website for the deep retrofit.
Yeah.
But then in the future, basically there are cycles of applications that are put in, and the typical funding application will be done on the basis of a community.
A community, yeah. But I mean, you know, we are looking for houses when we do have funding available, so we will take individual houses, yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks. Now, a question from James Murphy. Any idea if the original deep retrofit program that was run on a pilot basis will be reinstated? Okay, about a 50% grant aid. Okay, go ahead, Marcella.
I would say it wasn't sustainable. While it was fantastic, we had a list of people. We would have project managed 40 of those retrofit houses, and halfway through it went bust because SEI realised this isn't a sustainable project. So it will never go back to the 50%. I don't know whether they'll increase even 35%. We just don't know what the government or SEI could do from year to year.
Yeah, no,
I don't think it will ever go back to 50%. It really isn't sustainable, especially when there's so many houses to retrofit.
Yeah, I think the examples, what's been talked about is kind of maintaining the funding level as it stands now. But I know the government are working on financing, trying to find a way of providing cheaper financing for, so even if your grant is not going to increase, if you can get financing for less than, to bring it down to 3% or 2.5%, and I think there's a lot of work being done on the government side of things on that. So it looks as though the grants won't be increasing, but that maybe the financing will make the overall package cheaper than in the long run. Okay, and now we have a question about the air-to-water system. Can you install an air-to-water system and still use the radiators already installed in the house? Now, Marcella, do you want to talk that, or do you want me to talk about it?
You go on, Callum.
Okay, you can correct me if I make any mistakes, okay? The air-to-water systems, typically, the water being produced from them, from a question of efficiency, is probably not the same temperature, as high a temperature as coming from an oil boiler. So there may be some cases where you may need to increase the size of some of the radiators, because if the water temperature is a little bit lower, then a bigger radiator will make sure the heat is being distributed out into the house. But that's one of the things that the technical assessor would do. It's not guaranteed that you would need to change any radiators. There may just be some of them that need to be changed, depending on how the current radiators are sized. In terms of how successful it is, you're replacing, it works the exact same way. You're heating water, you're circulating it through the central heating system. There just may be some cases, like, as I say, where you may need to increase the size of the radiators, but that's not definite, if the technical assessor would decide on that. Okay, we have a question from Roisin and Roisin Garvey. What's the definition of a community? Can 4 houses in the estate or 4 neighbouring houses be an energy community?
I suppose within the sustainable energy communities, if 4 houses are seen to have a community benefit and it's all around having a community benefit and being sustainable, then I think, I'm not going to say they can't, I suppose a lot of them would talk about having a community building involved as well. But the criteria is around the sustainability and being able to, it having a community benefit.
Yeah, and I think another factor there as well is that when you apply for funding, like if a community does apply for funding, it's not a guarantee. I think there is a notion of value for money. There's an assessment done by SEI on the different applications that are made. So you're not, basically if you put in a very bad application, you probably won't get funding. A good application, as you're saying there, probably has more of a community aspect where you may have some private businesses, you may have some community buildings involved, and it's also the value for money, that the quality of the project that's being proposed. So if you have 4 houses that want to become a sustainable energy community and they just want to get grants just to get external installation done, it's not a great project.
Because they can't have a single focus either. They have to have a community focus. So the 4 houses, if all they were looking to get was the installation, that would be seen as a single focus, whereas they have to have a community focus and be beneficial to the whole community.
Yeah, so it is important that your application has to be a good application. It's not a given that you can just tick a box, say we're a community, and presume that you'll get funding. Okay.
I would say with the likes of, if you have 4 houses together, then maybe you get the 4 houses and come to Energy Communities Tipperary, and maybe as a group we could deal with you 4 neighbours together, and we would have funding available, or we could put it in as part of our community project, say for 2022 or 2023. So we could work around that as well.
Yeah. Okay, now we have a question from Bill Hamill. Can you externally insulate an old terrace house?
You can externally insulate all houses except for timber frame. So yes is the answer. If we go back before 1940s and start talking about stone buildings, I'll be here for the night. SEI are changing, or they're bringing out new regulations on that as well. But if it was a breathable material, then we could look at that as well. But normally, if it's a terraced house, it could be a cavity block. It may not be cavity wall, but cavity block. So there would be air that could travel within the cavity block behind the external insulation. So what we would say is to seal on top of the cavity block so that you stop the air from going through that cavity block and then externally insulate it. So yes is the answer, yeah.
Okay, now we had a question then from Pat Lidan, where he says, okay, talking to tradespeople, plumbers, and you can't get them for love nor money because they are absolutely up the walls at the moment. Why not look to upskill other suitable candidates? Pat, you're dead right. There's no question there is a need and scope for more employment in this area, and there's a need for upskilling. I know it's being looked at the moment by SEI in terms of policy for training, for upskilling people. I think by the end of the year, a lot of things are going to be coming out. 2021 is the year where they're putting in place the processes to be able to ramp up to get to those 500,000 homes by 2030. I think in terms of the figures, we need to be at, by the time we get to next year, no, by the time we get to 2023, we need to be doing 55,000 homes a year in terms of upgrade. This year, I think we're on plan to do 13,000. So you can see the ramp up that's needed is immense. And it's this year that the government are working on putting in place the manner in which people will be upskilled, and the tradesmen will be, and it'll attract people to come into the trades as well. There's no question, if people are up the walls now, then prices will rise, and people will see that it'll become a more attractive proposition. But you're dead right, Pat. There's scope and there's need for more people in the specific trades that are related to these energy upgrades. Okay. Now, do you see that question there from John Holland? Any information on retrofitting protected structures? Have you any experience with that, Marcella?
Yeah, run. They don't really want us touching protected structures because you would have to have a conservation architect on board. SEI don't like doing it. SEI don't like retrofitting houses before 1940s because of using the proper materials. They tell us we need to use materials that give us a certain U value, but the materials that we use aren't the correct materials for these older buildings. So as I mentioned, they're working on a new SR54 for traditional buildings, and that's due. There's consultation period over the next couple of months that we will be feeding into, and then that should be out by the end of the year. So I would say hold on anything until next year or the year after, when we've got proper guidelines, and hopefully it'll start to regulate itself. But right now I would hold off on it.
Okay, thanks. Now we have another question, and this is for you again, Marcella. Now, from initial assessment to completion of deep retrofit, including the different things, what is the typical duration? So what's the best case scenario for doing a deep retrofit?
Best case scenario would be 3 to 6 weeks, and that's just if we're going in doing a retrofit on the house, nothing else. But what inevitably happens when you're doing a retrofit, and that's what's slowing down a lot of contractors and taking up their time, is people are saying, oh, I just want to build an extension of a kitchen. So, or they're changing the layouts of internally inside in houses, and that's what takes up the time. If it was just a clear retrofit, you know, you could easily do a retrofit in 3 weeks if it didn't have external insulation, say. But then external insulation takes a couple of weeks. So yeah, 3 to 6 weeks would be the best case scenario. That's starting on site. Sorry, I should have said lead in from windows then, of course. So during COVID we had 6 to 8 week lead in time. Now it's starting to reduce to maybe 3 to 4 weeks. So we wouldn't start on site until we had the windows ready. So starting on site, and in some cases people would have to move out of their homes as well. Not in all cases.
Okay, and in terms of outside of the actual work done on site, in terms of the, you know, the assessment and all the preparation and getting the application in place and all that, does that add a couple of weeks onto it as well?
Yeah, it does, and longer, because the technical assessors are very busy. So it takes, you know, by the time you contact us, you know, it could take 2 to 3 weeks before the assessor comes out. It could take another week or two for the you get the technical assessment back to you. Then you know, we would talk through it with you. Then you decide, then, yeah, I have the appetite for this. I'd love to get a contractor out to price first. So you're talking another week, and then they have to come back with the price again. So it is a slow process, and especially, as I mentioned, that the funding that we have available now has to be spent by, the works have to be completed by October, the beginning of October. So if you do have a project, please do get in contact as soon as possible. And I know there was 1 or 2 people who have already contacted us. It's just been a busy week, so hopefully either I'll get back to you tomorrow or Monday, but we're keeping an eye on what's coming in.
Okay, and I think it's important that people understand as well that the funding that you actually have open at the moment is not something that will be, you know, there will be new applications going in later on during the year, but there is potential in the next 6 months, if somebody, you know, to get things, what are we, with the month of May, so within 6 months, there is funding available within that window. And that window, if it's not taken advantage of, then you're pushing it off into 2022 perhaps, or depending on other funding being available. So the good news, I suppose, I want to get across tonight is that there is actually funding available for people who have an idea about doing a deep retrofit, that it's possible to engage immediately with that funding. Okay, and now let me see, does anybody, I think we've covered all the questions so far.
There was just a question. I saw a question there about the size of a community. Maybe let's look at it, address that.
That was the question from Roisin, was it? That I think we talked about that, and that maybe it's not so much the question of size, but it's a question of the quality of the application that you make for funding. That there isn't a guarantee. You can have a small community, but if it's a mix and a well presented using a number of different upgrades to the different houses or to the different community buildings, then it could be acceptable. Whereas if it was, you know, it's the question of the quality of the application, maybe rather more so than the size of what would be a community.
There's a question in there from Thomas Griffin. In deep retrofit, is it 35% of windows doors capped at 2,000? So it's they are capped, but it's on the cost. So, you know, it could be the average cost of the windows to install the windows at double glazing would be around 8,000. So you get about 35% of that. If you decided to go with triple glazing and they were going to cost 20,000, you wouldn't get 35% of that. You would get it at the capped price. It would be a little bit more than 2,000 that Thomas had mentioned there.
Okay, now if there are no other questions coming in, just one thing I want to say is that, as I say, this is being recorded. I'll be sending out the link with the recording to you. I'll be sending out the presentations as well, because I think the next step is if you want to engage with ECTC, if you've got questions, you can come back to me on things. If you want to access me or assessors, there's lots of links that are available within the presentations that'll bring you to that, okay, to bring you on to the next step. As I say as well, we'll be putting in place this forum so that people can exchange ideas and ask questions and maybe recommend tradesmen or recommend different kinds of things that have worked in your house or not in another house. That'll be coming within a week as well. And otherwise, let me see if okay, we have a last question there from Pam Murphy. How big a solar system can a GA community centre with 3-phase power install? Now, Pam, we can't answer that question yet, because that's actually, there was a consultation paper on we're talking about photovoltaic, the feed-in tariff, where you can put an installation on for example, on a GA clubhouse and then sell back into the grid. That's the consultation process. The result has not been published yet. It'll be coming soon. It'll be coming probably within the month, because that's linked into the feed-in tariff that's going to be appearing from the 1st of July. So you'll have to wait for a couple of weeks, another month before we'll know that. Pat, if you want to get in touch with me, because I'm working on a project in the photovoltaic side of things, if you want to drop me a line, you can. I'll keep in touch with you once I see that that's coming up. I'll get back in touch with you. Okay. Okay, so I think we can, if there's no more questions coming in, I don't see any questions we haven't answered. We can wrap it up. I'd like to thank you all for joining in. It's good to see the interest, and I'd like to thank Tom and Marcella and Monica for sharing the information there. Now, there's obviously a lot more to do. The ECTC have the experience of working with the deep retrofits. The Clare Community Energy Agency, one of our goals is to share information and to advise people. So don't hesitate to contact, depending on the need that you have. The website is on the presentation for clarenergy.ie. So don't hesitate to get in touch with us there, and we'll, if there's advice or information we can share with you, we'll more than happily do that. Okay, so I think we have another question from Noreen Ramsey. Do technical assessors work for SCAI? In other words, to apply for one of those, do you go through Marcella?
So if you looking to do a deep retrofit and you want to do the technical assessment, then you can apply through us for the ECTC, or you can go directly to SCAI and you can get a list of technical assessors there as well. So there's two ways of doing it, I suppose. But if you're thinking of getting works done this year and you want to come in under the deep retrofit, then I would suggest coming through us, and we'll probably be able to get the technical assessor out quicker to you from the guys that are on our books, and we're used to working with them as well. But if you just want to get a technical assessment for your own information, then you can go directly to SCAI.
Yes, that would be in the case, let's say, for example, if you decided you know your house or whatever, you just want to get a heat pump installed yourself, and it's not going to be, there won't be other matters, and you can avail of the grant that's available just for an individual homeowner. In that case, you need to go directly yourself to the technical assessors list on a SCAI. In the questions and answers, I'll put in the links to the different answers so you'll be able to access quickly that. You'll see where the different information is, okay?
Can I just come in there on that question as well? My understanding is that the BER assessors certainly, and I presume technical assessors are the same, that they don't actually work for SCAI. They are endorsed by them, and they're trained, or they're endorsed by them, if you like, but they're not working for SCAI. They're independent assessors.
Exactly, that's dead right. Yeah, they're approved by SCAI. They've done the qualifications and the training that's needed for that. Yeah, but they don't work for them.
And audited by SCAI as well. Yeah.
Okay, we have one last question there from Kevin Noonan. Will a BER be required to qualify for feed-in tariff? A BER is required of feed-in tariff. No, if we're not talking about the grants, the SCAI grants, there will be two sides to the feed-in tariff. Basically to be split in two. Half of the feed-in tariff, you won't need a BER. Anybody who produces within a certain limit will be able to get some part of the feed-in tariff. It's looking like the second part, the second half, which would maybe 4 or 5 cents a unit, may require a BER, but that's also, as the other person who asked the question there about the solar on top of the GEA, we're going to have to wait another few weeks or another month before that's finally published by the government before we know about that. But it's quite probable there will be a part that you will need a BER to qualify for part of the feed-in tariff. But again, that's to watch out for within the next 3 weeks or a month, okay? Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up with that, okay? If there's no more questions coming again. So again, thank you very much for joining in this evening. Thanks very much to our speakers. And there's a lot more to do. There'll be a lot more activity in this area. So as I say, if you have other questions, get in touch with me through the Clare Energy Agency, or get in touch with Marcella. Or if you're interested in the sustainable energy communities, I'll be putting in the links in the presentations to there as well, so you can see how you can join one that exists already, or maybe if you want to set up a new one in your community, how you would do that. Okay, so there's a lot more to do. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah.